Hi everyone, and welcome to my second episode or my second video in the Quick Snippets by Roxy Creations series. So today I thought I'd talk about the difference between Boro stitching, Kantha stitching, running stitch and invisible stitch, because we do get questions about that quite regularly, and it is definitely terms that we refer to. So I thought it'd be a good idea for beginners, like experienced people kind of know this, but to tell you what the difference is. So I'll start off with Kantha. So Kantha is an Indian thing. It could be from other places, but I know it to be from India. Where what they did is they got layers of thin fabric. So this here would contain, if I can separate it, see if I can pull it apart a bit. I don't know if you can see, but there's the pink layer on top, then another one, it looks like 2, 3, 4 layers of thin fabric, and they lay them on top, and they effectively do a very tiny running stitch. So this is a really small running stitch. You can probably see that white, and it is not 100% perfect. Some of them are really tiny, some of them are a little bit longer, so longer and then very tiny. And they stitch them together to make these beautiful quilts. I've got several of the quilts, but I just thought I'd show you these samples here. And it's almost like they'd patch them together. So you'd have different pieces of fabrics that were all stitched together to make what is called a Kantha quilt. Kantha, Kantha. Okay, so these are just some offcuts. So patterns were different, and you'd have different ones. Like it might not be all over this pattern on one side. It would have different patches of different fabrics. This one's a little bit thicker than the other one. There's quite a thick chunky piece in there. It's almost like they'd get what they had and just stitch them together and add bits. And so in principle, just saying there's at least 4 layers in this one as well, but it feels a bit thicker. In principle, a Kantha quilt has some similarities to Boro. So Boro, which is Japanese, B-O-R-O, is okay, how do I describe this? So Boro is when people in Japan would have a textile, whatever it is, whether it was a piece of clothing or a quilt, a throw, a coverlet, whatever it was. And Boro is basically when something has been worn down, destroyed, torn, whatever. There's some kind of damage, and then they'd repair it. So Boro is where they'd actually patch and repair things. So for example, if this had a hole in it, they might get this piece of fabric and then they'd stitch it down. So often that stitching was also running stitch, but it did look different ways. It could sometimes just be around the outside. So a beautiful piece of Boro. I wish I had one. They're actually really expensive nowadays if you're looking online. So if you look on, like, for example, Etsy, or even places like eBay, they can sell for thousands of dollars. So they were often indigo blue. The reason that they were indigo was because the working class people were not permitted to wear bright colours, and so what they do is with the fabrics that they got, they'd dye them with the indigo plant, which comes out in that beautiful navy blue, because it was a cheap way to dye the fabric. And so often the Boro quilts are navy blue. They also used a lot of brown as well. And so Boro is the concept of repairing something. And they'd have, for example, a quilt, and through generations, they'd continue to repair and repair and repair. And these things would just build up into these beautiful textiles that, you know, we all love today and would love to, get a sample of. But they're, you can get bits and pieces, but the authentic big ones are thousands of dollars. So maybe one day. So that's Boro, but similar principles where running stitch could be used. And then running stitch is pretty much the most basic stitch. So I'm going to bring over a piece that I've been making, a slow stitch piece. So this is just something I've been playing with. This is the most simple thing to do, and I'm going to show you this today. And I have used simple running stitch, which I often refer to as Kantha stitch. My sister and I, Rach, we both call it Kantha stitching. And you can use a contrasting thread. So I've done some running stitch here on different angles with a contrasting thread in red. Okay, but most of my stitching is either, actually I don't even use this. You can use this kind of thread. I use a thin crochet thread. So something like this. Okay, so all my stitching's been done with that, and I'm going to show you the very basics. So if you are new to slow stitching, this is a great thing to start with because it's super simple, and I'll show you how you can add some embellishments. So just put that to the side. And I have a cheap piece of calico. In Australia, we call this calico, possibly homespun in the US, I think, just unbleached cotton. It's cheap, got this for nothing, really cheap, and it's going to be my base. You're not going to see this. So all you do is you get some different fabrics and you layer them up. So I have a bunch of scrap fabrics here. Okay, and I have quite a few in this bowl. And what I would do is so some of these have been used in the piece that I just showed you. I would grab bits and pieces and I would start layering these up based on where I want them. So let's have a look. Okay, just checking. Yes, I'm on screen. Good. So this piece is quite big, but it's really pretty. It's a piece of Liberty. I might like to take a smaller piece. And then possibly this fabric might set the tone for the colours that I use in this piece of stitching. So let's say, for example, put that there. And what I would do is I would grab my fabrics. So just grab my scraps. Don't need to put all your precious ones down. And that is so pretty. That is, I think, either an old French or English piece. I might have got that one from Deb from Doll's House Vintage. And then that might go somewhere there. I love the Betsy, but that's really bright, and that's the one I used on the last one. Same with that. This is a lovely piece of dyed linen, which I think's pretty, so we might pop that there. Red's probably not the colour I'm going for. There we go. That could go in. So what you do is you just grab bits and pieces, and that's a lovely thin piece of old material, and you start layering them up. That's a lovely Liberty. Think about that. That wouldn't be too bad just to bring a little bit more brightness. Again, it's a Liberty. These are just some little offcuts I've got. Okay, that's a scrap, but I would keep that because I would use bits of that later. Now, I love that. I'm going to just take that off. It's got a bit of a stitched seam. Okay, I've used that in the other piece. I'll give that one a miss. Give these red ones a miss because I've used most of these. Don't want beige. Not quite. Okay, little scraps. I have a bowl of little scraps. All right, so let's go into my other bowl. Oh, I love this. This is a piece of, in fact, I want to use that. That's a piece of fabric from my sister. So I'm going to rearrange this. I want this coming through. Let me just play around with this a bit more. I want this kind of, so that if, depending on what I use this for, this will be a prominent piece. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You keep finding bits that you like. You could always put the bits in a pile first. See that? That would go nicely there. And I really like this with it. So you just keep playing around until you're happy with your little piece of puzzle. Now I'm starting to like that better. Okay, I've got a scrap bowl. Some of these might be a bit small, these scraps. Actually, there was that. I forgot that was on the back. Now that's really pretty. Let's add that there. I feel like I need a little strip of something there. I'm going to cover that. So you see how you just keep playing around until you get what you want. I'd like something striped there, like maybe some ticking or something. I may not have everything I need in here. I might need to get my big scrap bucket out. That's a piece of quilt. There's a seam there. I know this is a nice one. Ticking. I need ticking or a stripe. Anyway, I might need to get the bigger. That's not long enough because that would have been good down the side there. What's this piece like? Is this long enough? Yes, so that could potentially go under there. Okay, so I think you get the idea. I won't fully fill it in because I'll have some more fabrics. Once you've got your fabrics down, so I would fill this in as well, or you can do it as you go. I actually am going to show you another one where I'm doing it as I go. I would pin these in place and then you'll do the running stitch or the Kantha stitching. Okay, so that would all be pinned in place. I'm going to show you one that I've started. So this is a perfect way for beginners to start making a piece of fabric. So you're using all these different pieces of fabric to bring them together to create a new fabric. So I have started this one. You can see I've been piecing it as I go, and I have some gaps still to fill in. This one's a bit bigger than the other one. So running stitch, I've already started here. I just need to thread this up. Okay, what type of needle am I using? This one I think is just a gold eye embroidery needle. The most common needles that I will use, I know I've got some in a bowl over here. These are actually my favorite, milliner's needles. There's different sizes. The sizing doesn't always make sense with milliner's needles, but that's a 1 and that's a 4. These ones are great. The eye is big enough for me to use crochet cotton or even perlé cotton like this. I can get that through that eye. And the beauty of these are perfect for wrap stitches. So if you're doing French knots, bullion knot, that kind of thing, the eye is the same width as the shaft of the needle. So it's not hard to pull the needle through, especially if you've got a lot of layers, which we often get with sew stitching. I love milliner's needles. There's a couple of different brands. And then these are French needles, Bowen, is that how you pronounce it? These are chenille needles, chenille. They're tapestry, that's a bit bigger. This is a chenille needle, similar to what I'm using just there. This is a size 20. Size 20 is good. The eye is bigger, but it does get wider there. This is great when I'm using things like hand-dyed wools or thicker threads because the eye is bigger and so I can thread it. So they're probably the two main needles I use, or just simple embroidery needles, which is pretty much what I've got threaded here. Okay, so running or Kantha stitch. I've done it on all these pieces except this one here. I have just done a running stitch around the outside, but it's very simple. My fabric's already down. I've already gone this way. It's just over and under. So under, over. I do not fuss about keeping my stitch lengths perfect. They are not perfect. They are different lengths. It doesn't matter. I just do my best to keep it somewhat straight and, you know, fairly consistent, but I'm not fussed. Slow stitching is a very forgiving hobby because it does not need to be neat and perfect. There are many people that do this type of stitching that are beautifully neat and they have very perfect little stitches, but it doesn't matter if you are not like that. You can still make an absolutely stunning piece of slow stitching. So again, if you're a beginner, this is a great way to start. Get yourself a base piece of calico, pull out some scrap fabrics, cut them up into little bits and pieces and just collage them on like a jigsaw puzzle. Stitch them all down and then you can do a little bit of embellishing if you want to, or you can leave it as is. And in a future video, I'm going to show you a couple of different things that you could use a simple piece of slow stitch fabric like this. So different projects, I've got two that I'm going to show you in the future. So you might like to have a go at making a couple of these or a few of these, and different sizes are okay as well. So one thing I'm going to show you is turning this into a book cover, which is really simple. And the other thing I was going to show you is turning it into a pouch or an envelope or a pocket, that kind of thing. So both really simple projects. I need to finish slow stitching these pieces. So I would just keep going back and forth. The width that I have here it's probably a bit under 1 centimetre. Most of these are under 1 centimetre, 1/2 centimetre. This one here is a little bit wider. That one's almost 1 centimetre there, closer here. And then once I finish stitching that, I'd go to my scrap ball. And I know I've got a piece. This piece I want to put on, and I want to put on a piece of that. And then I've got other blues and things that I will work in around it. So let's say, for example, just get that out of the way. I wanted this one, which might go there. Then I have to work in around it and find some bit like that's beautiful. Is that long enough? Just that'll just fit there. But that is beautiful. It's an old piece of quilt. This one here, I might want to put down here. That's a beautiful piece that I got from my sister. What else have I got? I'm trying to keep it in. See, that's nice because I've got a bit of the tealy coloured there. So it might even be I get a bit like this and I can't work out where to put it, but it might look maybe just a little bit there, layering over the top. Okay, so you can add bits and pieces. Do I use that one? Nope. It's quite a big piece though. I could trim it. I probably don't want the pinky bit. That could be used on a different piece. I love ripping. You get frayed edges and stuff. I prefer that than cutting things for slow stitching. I don't want to cover too many of the, I like those crosses. So I might even rip that down smaller. Oh, I have used that there. I don't want to use the same. I'm trying to use different ones. This one. Look at all these bits. Oh, this one actually could go there. And you keep all your small bits. I'm going to show you why in a minute. So that one could end up there. And then I just need a little strip there. Let me see what would work. Even that, just that old piece of, that might just be off a quilt block. That could go in there. Okay, and then like I said, you might find little bits that you really want to put in. So I'm going to show you. I've got another bowl here. These are tiny, tiny scraps, just little bits. I keep all these because these all end up going in. For example, I might even make that smaller. Let's find a little. Oh, I love this. This came off an old quilt. It's just lovely and old, and that's beautiful. I'd love that. I might stitch that down, running stitch that down later. Okay, once it's all down. And then I might get a really, let's find a tiny one. Look at this tiny little check that's come off something. All faded on the front. I'll put that little piece there. Okay, and you can just build it up. That's that beautiful fabric. You might want a tiny bit of it. Let's just see if I can rip a tiny bit. Yep, perfect. I might want to lay that up a little bit. And I stitch them down. So it starts to evolve as a piece and become more interesting. And then I may want a contrasting thread, or I want to use some hand-dyed wool to do some running stitches. So I may want to contrast and go with a different colour, for example. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the first piece I showed you. And show you where I've done a little bit of embellishing. And I'm going to get to these stitches later. Maybe even my next video might be revisiting the stitch sampler that we did in our Roxy's Journal of Stitchery Volume 1, and I might do that. So in this I did some embellishing in some red stranded cotton. And I used, it's over here, there's a bit left, 2 strands. Okay, so I did some running stitch over a tiny piece that I popped down. Okay, I popped down another tiny piece. I did some running stitch that way. I did some running stitch this way. One thing I will say is when I do little bits like this, and I've done it here as well, I don't want to have all my stitches ending up perfectly square or perfectly rectangular. So some have gone longer, some have gone shorter. Little bit longer, little bit shorter. Same on this side, longer, shorter, 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 longer. I don't want it to look perfectly even. Okay, it's even a lopsided. I've done more here. Sorry, the video cut off for a sec. So I was just saying I don't want it all to be perfectly even. It's a bit lopsided. So this is something that would be good to get started on, making your piece of fabric like this. So using your background calico, getting out your simple threads. You can even use this perlé cotton, crochet cotton, and just running stitch your pieces down. Now, the only thing I haven't told you about yet is invisible stitch, which is the same as running stitch, but what you do is you do a little tiny stitch on top and then a long one underneath, and a little tiny stitch on top and a long one underneath. And what it does is you just have those tiny stitches holding that fabric down, holding it in place, and you don't have the really visible running stitches the way you do on this piece. So essentially Kantha, Boro, running stitch, and invisible stitch all have some really similar properties. They're very simple stitches. Boro can get more technical and have more patterns and be more interesting, but the rest are very straightforward, and it is a perfect way to start your slow stitching journey. Make your own fabric from scraps, simple running stitch. You can just sit in front of the TV and just do this. It doesn't take too long. I have done my running stitches in different directions, so up and down here, up and down here, up and down, across, and I just change direction all the time. And then if you are wanting to, getting your little scraps of fabric like I've done in these spots, 2 pieces there, 2 pieces there, and a piece there, and I've just done some running stitch in a contrasting thread or a bright thread that stands out over the top. Later on, you can embellish further. For example, I've got things in here that I might want to embellish, like these gorgeous little Suffolk puffs. But that can come later, and you do not need these to do basic slow stitching. This just fabric and thread is all you need. Keep handy your little tiny scraps. Keep handy smaller pieces like this in a bowl, or pull out of your scrap bucket the ones that you like the colour of, and get stitching. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Slightly longer than quick, but a fun thing to do, and we're going to use these pieces in some future projects. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.